Hey y'all, so 2 weeks ago I Thanos stamped my script for Kaleidoscope up onto the shelf. I will be revisiting it at a later date, but for now I need to take a break so I can get some clarity and figure out how to best move forward with it. Last week I pulled up a video about motivation for creatives and pep talks that I give myself when I'm losing my own motivation, because I was recovering from my bachelorette party. I had an amazing, indulgent weekend with food and wine in Valle de Guadalupe in Mexico. It's beautiful wine country, highly recommend. And this week now, finally, is my first week officially documenting the process of making this contained romantic comedy film that is, as of yet, untitled. So I'm not quite sure what to call this new series. It's not The Making of Kaleidoscope anymore. And because I don't have a title, I can't just insert the new title. So for now, we're just going to go with Cake Fight Presents The Making of. So, hello and welcome to another and the first episode of Cake Fight Presents The Making of. I'm writer, director, producer Paige Feldman. And this week, as every week, I'm taking you inside my process of making my debut feature film. We're going from idea to premiere in real time. Today, I want to share with you my outline process for this feature, because I literally started with nothing but 2 characters, 1 location, and potentially a kind of feeling that I wanted to explore. And thanks to figuring out a theme and a ton of brainstorming, in a very short amount of time, I created a whole rich, fully developed outline, subplots and all. So I'm gonna roll you some titles, and when we get back, it's screenshare time! As you all might recall, the idea for my contained romantic comedy came initially when I was asked to pitch a bunch of ideas to a production company in hopes that they would choose one of those pitches and I would get paid to write it. Now, I pitched, I think, half a dozen, 10, pitched a decent amount of ideas. None of them ended up getting chosen, but this one idea, it stuck with me for some reason. I loved the idea that there are these 2 characters in a remote cabin together, figuring out their lives and falling in love. And as part of the pitch, I of course created a whole character arc. I created obstacles, plots, the whole shebang. I essentially kind of had an outline already for this story. But when I started to think about taking this pitch and creating my own script for it, one that I could write and make, and it wouldn't be subject to anybody else's mandate, I decided to learn from my mistakes with Kaleidoscope and do something a little bit different. Now, you might recall that I started working on this just 15 minutes a day while I was still editing Kaleidoscope. And I didn't really want to admit it at that point, but I knew there was something not quite right with Kaleidoscope. I knew that I hadn't quite found the story. I knew that something was just not targeted enough. It was all just kind of mushy, all the details. Nothing felt cohesive. And while I ultimately figured out that it was because my theme of Kaleidoscope had gotten lost in all of those plot details, I think somewhere inside me, I knew that that was the problem from the start. Because instead of taking this pitch document that I had already created and just saying like, all right, let's go, let's write something, I decided to step back and say, all right, well, if I'm going to write this for me, not subject to any mandate, what do I want to write about? What do I want it to be about besides 2 people in 1 location? I went and started re-outlining this. I scrapped all of the plot details. The only things I kept were the characters' names and the fact that they're going to be stuck in some sort of cabin, house, Airbnb, mansion, something together for a finite period of time, let's say a week. And if that's all I have, I don't really have a plot. I just have 2 people who are going to be talking to each other, except about what and why. And I love mumblecore, but I don't want to make this entirely mumblecore. So I decided to start with a why, with a theme, and build from there. So I started by trying to find a theme, choosing a why, something I really wanted to interrogate and explore, a question, an idea, a belief that I had, something that I could really sink my teeth into and make the movie about in a larger sense. It's not just about two people falling in love. It's about them falling in love while this thematic question is explored and answered. Now, if you want to follow along with me in this method of outlining, that's where I'd start. Just choose a theme. Now, it could be really simple. You might have a question you want to answer, a belief you want to share, a quote that you love that you want to make the centerpiece of your story. But if you're having trouble figuring out what that why could be or what that theme could be, I'd suggest thinking about books and movies that you love or songs that you love and asking yourself what about them draws you in. What is the central question in your favorite book? What is the relationship dynamic that has you enthralled? And what truth can you learn from that? You also don't have to have an answer as your theme. I don't right now. You can just think of a question you want to know more about. Now, for me, I like thinking about things that happened to me in my past, beliefs I had in my childhood, times when my own beliefs and worldview was challenged and made me question it. And so I sat around and just kind of contemplated questions that I had and moments that really made an impact on me. And for this contained romantic comedy, one of the things that stuck out to me immediately, and I love going with a first instinct on this type of thing because it means that there was something simmering under the surface that's going to pop up and like be a little brainworm thing that I need to explore it. I need to know more about it. The stuff that's the most intriguing, that's the thing that's really going to stick with you throughout the long process of outlining, writing, rewriting, production, all of the stages. A while ago, I was in therapy and I was talking to my therapist, and it was one of those days where you walk in and you're like, it's towards the end of my going to therapy because this is literally all I had to talk about. I was like, no one's fixed, but like, I'm not paying $120 to figure out nothing problems, and this was a nothing problem. So I really wanted to make my own birthday cake. I love baking. I make my own birthday cake every year, but this year I wanted to make my own birthday cake, the same one that my grandma had made me when I was growing up. It's a checkerboard cake. It has yellow cake and chocolate cake in a checkerboard pattern. There's special pans for it. I got the pans. It was very exciting. The day before the therapy, I had called my mom and asked her, what's Gami's recipe? What's the recipe for that? Because she was a fantastic baker. She made the world's best oatmeal raisin cookies, actually. Picture with me. That's my grandma who makes the world's best oatmeal raisin cookies. So I figured like she has a cake recipe for this. It's going to be great. I'm going to be able to make it. And I love connecting with my family and my past through baking and cooking and digging into these recipes. I feel a real connection to all of my ancestors through that. And my mom told me, oh, she just got the Duncan Hines mix. And I'm sorry, what? Boxed cake mix? Excuse me? No, I have nothing against boxed cake mix. It was delicious, clearly. I thought it was like this whole homemade situation. But I love baking. I love cooking. I like making things from scratch, seeing how they work. And then once I know how they work, making tiny tweaks to just make things exactly how I want them. Hearing that this was boxed mix, I just couldn't. And so that's what I brought into therapy. I was just saying like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do because on one hand, I want to make this cake. I love this cake, but it's boxed mix and I want to make my own cake. On one hand, we have the boxed mix, which is the traditional cake. And the other hand, like, I don't want to do that. But also, how could I not honor my grandma by refusing to make what she did? And I told you this is a nothing problem, but my therapist said, you can make your own tradition. What about that? What if you find a way to make this cake that you love your own way? Make your own tradition. And that blew my mind. I don't know why I never thought of this idea that I could create my own tradition. I didn't even think about, well, traditions have to come from somewhere. Someone had to start them at some point. So why couldn't I be the one to start this? That question, which stuck with me, I think that was almost 10 years ago at this point. This question has stuck with me for a decade, like the idea of making your own ritual, making your own tradition versus the traditions that you've held on to and that are meaningful to you? And how do you distinguish one from the other? How do you know when it's time to make a new tradition? That idea of tradition versus self-determination, it's something that I've never really explored beyond just and then figuring out how to make a checkerboard cake without the box mix, which is difficult because you have to make sure that the cakes have the same baking time and temperature. So that's that question, which is really personal to me. It came from my own history. It's about things that matter to me. That question is something that I want to explore because I don't know the answer to it yet. And I think that's something that I'm going to struggle with throughout my life. And I think it's a cool thing to struggle and interrogate and think about. So that is what my why and what my theme was. And now that I had my theme, I could really dig in and figure out what this story was about within the parameters that I've set, which are 2 characters, 1 location. So now we get to screen share, and I will show you how I brainstormed all of this. So now that I have my theme, the next thing that I did was brainstorm a ton of external specific goals. What an external specific goal means is basically something that the audience who's not inside the character's head can observe the character doing and determine whether they've met their goal. So something that's external, outside the character's internal monologue, something that I have to do that's visible. And specific is something that's easily determined. One can easily determine whether that goal has been met. For example, in this list here, host their own Thanksgiving dinner. That is a specific and external goal because the character would have to make a bunch of food or buy a bunch of food, invite people over, make sure that everybody knows it's Thanksgiving, and then people come over and have dinner. So that external specific goal. Run a marathon. And that's another one that's on my list here of goals. And there's a fantastic indie feature called Brittany Runs a Marathon that is about this. It's about a character who sets run a marathon as her external specific goal. So now we know what external and specific are. Why is that important? It's because it's really difficult to depict an internal goal on screen. Like a story about people making a decision. I love stories where people make decisions. I really do. I think they're so much fun. Those are the types of things I love to write, but it's not very interesting on screen. When people are thinking on screen, all you get is a bunch of No one wants that. Any internal monologue externalized becomes really exposition heavy, brain dumpy. Like it's not good storytelling. Even if you have like a character wanting to go through an internal shift, you need to show that through an action that can be depicted visually. And so external specific goals provide visual action, things that characters can do that move the story forward. That's why external specific goals. I came to understand this, and it's a lesson that's really been difficult for me because, like I said, I love the decision-making stories through 2 different classes that I took on writing, and I want to credit them here real quick because I'm using elements of both of these classes, seminars, to create this brainstorming and outlining technique that I'm doing here. So the first one is through SCBWI, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, at their national conference, I think like 7 years ago at this point. I took a breakout session with an author who's, I apologize, I cannot find who did this session. I looked in my notes, I looked on the website, I just cannot find it. But it was a fantastic session about building plot based on an object, where the author who was leading it said, all right, I want you to think of an object. And my object was a key. All right, and now I need you to think about something that our protagonist needs to do with that object. And so I thought, all right, I have a key, so they're gonna need to find the treasure chest that the key unlocks. And then he said, all right, now I want you to write down a bunch of things that could be in the way of the character finding, getting to that goal. And so it was like sea monsters, and I decided it was on a boat. So like not being able to sail, or a thunderstorm, losing your first mate. So I had all of these lists of obstacles, and he said, all right, congratulations, you've outlined a story. And that's when I kind of learned of the magic of external specific goals. Now I still want to write making decision stories and people's mindsets change, but I can do that within the context of here's a plot line, here's something that they have to do where the result will mirror the decision process that they have to make. So in the second course that I took, that helped me develop this outlining process is Corey Mandell's screenwriting program. I took it through Film Independent. I think 2017, 2018, where he talks about outlining based on theme. He did a lot of the same work as in the SCBWI Breakout Session, except he added in stakes and really made sure that the stakes and the external specific goal were focused within the context of the theme. So I combined a lot of the stuff that both of these classes taught me to create this version of an outline method. So I brainstormed a lot of external specific goals, and I decided to brainstorm 54 external specific goals. 54 is 3 times chai. Chai is the Hebrew word for life, and in numerology, in Hebrew numerology, chai, the letters in chai add up to 18, and so 18 is considered a lucky number, a number that brings life and good fortune to people. And so in order to kind of bless my film, I was brainstorming in multiples of chai here, so 54. Usually I do 20, and I have a whole thing about like brainstorming 20 things, but that's usually for smaller plot related like road bumps where I have a very specific question. This is, what is this movie going to be about? And I have the whole world open up to me. I tried not to close myself off for ideas based on like the 2 characters, 1 location thing that I wanted to do, because I can always shut it down later. But I did keep in mind my theme, which I wrote at the top and highlighted in purple. What is the value of ritual? What is the value of sameness? When you decide to make a change, how do you take care of yourself without losing focus on the important things and people in your life? So then I brainstormed all of these things here. And some of them were really stupid. Learn to cheat at Candyland. And some of them were a little bit trivial. Win a silly face competition. Travel to X location for Y festival. That one had nothing to do with the 2 characters, 1 location. Catch lightning bugs in a jar. That one just it evoked a mood to me. Even though it's not really, for a feature film, it's not much of a goal. But then some of them I really liked, like find a time capsule they buried. All right, so after I had this giant list of 54 external specific goals, I went through and narrowed it down, obviously. So I narrowed it down to a list of the goals that converged with the theme that I want to explore, and also converge with my desired 2 characters in 1 location idea for this feature. And what I came up with is this list of converged external specific goals. I have a list of 13 here. Now, some of them are crossed off. Create a memorial park for a lost family member, run a marathon, and successfully properly prepare a traditional tea service. For Run a Marathon, Brittany Runs a Marathon did a fantastic job of showing that journey. And so I didn't want to step on those toes, especially if I'm doing 2 characters, 1 location. I also didn't feel like running a marathon was going to be an interesting film idea for a romantic comedy over a finite period of time. I want it to be just 1 week, and it takes, from personal experience, I know it takes about 4 months to fully train for running a marathon, and that's really only if you can already run 3 miles pretty easily. So that didn't seem practical. Create a memorial park for a lost family member. While that memorial park would have been a great way to show a new ritual and creating new traditions and answer my theme, it's not the only way to do it. It's an expensive way to do it, and I think I decided that I could do better with some of these other ideas at a lower budget and without adding on an extraneous build, extraneous production design, especially because I'm thinking I'm going to go out to Joshua Tree, Palm Springs, Big Bear, somewhere where I can rent an Airbnb for fairly cheap and film over the course of 7 to 10 days. This build would add a lot of expense and a lot of time for something that isn't necessarily going to give me the absolute best impact. And then successfully properly prepare a traditional tea service that converges with everything that I want. It's a ritual, it's about tradition, and it can be done by 2 people in 1 location, but it's not personal to me. There is no traditional Jewish tea service as far as I know. While I'd really be interested in exploring and learning about a traditional tea service in another culture, For my first feature, I want it to fully reflect who I am, my background, and what I bring to the table, because a first feature is not just, as a directorial debut, it's not just about, all right, here we go, I'm starting my career. It's also a calling card for future stories, and I don't want to be the person who is called upon to explore cultures that aren't my own. I don't want to be the person who is called on about tea services necessarily. I'd rather stick more within my own roots for this first feature, so I nixed that. These others, though: find a way to duplicate grandma's cookie recipe that got lost after she died, successfully meditate for 20 minutes. I cannot do that because I find meditation boring and anxiety-provoking. Recreate an old family photo, find the lake rock formation place that an important to them older relative talked about, complete a list of summer must-dos from a parent, grandparent, older relative's teen years, win a scavenger hunt competition, find a key to open a grandparent's Hope Chest locked box, there's that key thing, finish the New York Times Sunday crossword puzzle on their own without any help, and then burn all their ex-partner memorabilia in a bonfire. So these are the finalists. These 10 are the finalists for my external specific goals. And the last thing I did was brainstorm a list of opposition and stakes for all of these goals, of all of my finalists. I did 5 for each. It was a really long, fairly arduous process to think of 5 oppositions and 5 oppositions and 3 stakes. Some of them were repeats just because it doesn't have to be wholly original. So what this was doing was basically seeing all right, how is this going to be depicted on screen? I found for burn all their ex-partner memorabilia in a bonfire, stuff like they still have feelings for one of their exes. That's an internal opposition. It's really difficult to show unless their ex is there when they're trying to burn the box. But even that, this feels like a short film. So by brainstorming this opposition and these stakes, I was able to X off a few others, and ultimately, after doing all of this work, I was like, I still don't know which one to go with. I had a list of 7 or so that I was really excited about, so that's when I turned to a sounding board. If you have a writing group, and you're following along with this, go to your writing group if you can't choose one. In my case, I went to my mom. My mom is a published children's author. She writes middle grade and YA fiction. So I'm not just going to her to ask her which one she likes the best and aren't I special? Should I go on the fridge? This is her job. Don't ask your mom unless she's a professional. Don't try this at home. She helped me figure out which ones both she was most excited about and I was most excited about by just giving her opinion. And the one that I kind of knew, but I was wondering whether it was as good as others, is complete a list of summer must-dos from a parent, grandparent, or older relative's teen years. That is the A story for this contained romantic comedy. Ash, the male lead, is trying to honor his grandmother by completing this summer bucket list that she created when she was a teenager. So we had this, but we needed something for Mitch, my female lead. I initially wanted it to be one of these other things, one of these, the converged goals, one of the top 10 here. But as I was talking with my mom, I realized all of these top 10 feel like A stories except for Successfully Meditate for 20 minutes. But this is a short film, Successfully Meditate for 20 minutes. At best, it's a C story. And I wanted something because Mitch is going to be the point of view character through the beginning for the most part, so giving her the B plot, it will allow Ash to shine in his own way and create more of a two-hander feel. I needed to give her an external specific goal that didn't overshadow the list of summer must-dos, because Ash is going to ask for Mitch's help, and that's how they're going to make their whole relationship start. So I went back to the drawing board, and I was so glad that I brainstormed 54 external specific goals, because I went through all of these and ultimately landed on this: make money as a songwriter, even just $1. Mitch is a songwriter, a frustrated songwriter who is afraid of sharing her songs. She's afraid of making a change within her own routine. So her goal is not so much about an old-time ritual. It's about creating a new tradition for herself. She's afraid to get out of her rut, which is tangential to this value of ritual theme, because a ritual is a rut that you've comfortably decided to keep moving forward in a way. And the way that Ash's summer bucket list relates to this is that this is a bucket list he found from his grandmother right after she died. It's from when she was 17 or so, and she didn't seem to cross anything off of it. So he is going to complete it as a way to honor her, because he doesn't feel like his family knew his grandmother in the way that she really was. He had a special relationship with her. He's kind of the black sheep of his family, but she understood him, and he wants to honor her in a new and different way. But in doing so, he's kind of hurting his family as well, because he's separating from them. So we have Ash, who's sitting Shiva, and Mitch, who's trying to write a song and create something new. And they're going to be helping each other complete their goals, and also learning a lot about themselves, a lot about each other, and ultimately falling in love. I got to these goals through a theme and through brainstorming. Once I got both of these goals, the outline process just clicked, and I wrote a whole outline based on the 7 beats of the romantic comedy, or really the 8 beats, including this I can make it on my own thing. And now I'm writing. And I'll be finished with this draft hopefully in about a week from when you're seeing this video. But I'm putting the cart before the horse right here. This is the method that I used to get to my outline. And honestly, after spending about a week or so doing this brainstorming, about 15 minutes a day, making these decisions, it only took an hour after that to write this whole outline out. 15 minutes times 7 is an hour 45, and then another hour. So it was like less than 3 hours from start to finish to get all of this stuff ready, get my outline going, and be ready to write. And writing something that's really clean and tied into theme and not bogged down by extra characters and extra motivations and extra subplots. It's really refreshing. I'm happy, y'all. So that's how I outlined this contained romantic comedy film. I hope you found this method helpful, and if you did, please leave me a comment in the comment section below. And next week, speaking of putting the cart before the horse, I'm going to show you the budget that I made for this film as I was outlining, because my goal here is to make a movie for a budget that is reasonable, that pays everybody well, but is also affordable in terms of movie making. So next week I'm going to share with you the budget that I made for this film in the notes app of my iPhone, literally while I was brushing my teeth. Film budgeting can be really complex, but it doesn't have to be. So I'm going to show you all that next week. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm so happy to have you all here on this journey with me as I work towards making my first feature. And thank you for being supportive of this pivot. I know this is the right move, and I'm so excited to share more on this journey, on the making of